everyone, and welcome once again to S.H.I.E.L.D. Discussions. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Dan.
Today we're talking about the 4th episode of S.H.I.E.L.D., I Spy, which is a title that if they had put it up at the front of the episode, like I wish shows did more often now, would have given way too much away too early, and I'm kind of glad, actually, that I didn't know the title of this episode while I was watching it.
Yeah, I agree.
If you think about it, yeah, it's a neat title. And what's cool also, I love double entendre titles. What's really neat about it is it's I Spy because it's like the most espionage type episode we've gotten so far.
Oh, and I
but
for
it's and reminded me of things like I Spy, and then also that's the girl's whole thing is she has this eyepiece and she's being controlled by it. So it's kind of neat that we have that sort of thing. Dan, this is, I think, in a lot of ways, the best episode so far.
I agree. I mean, I had said that about the previous episode, but I think this show is starting to find an identity and define these characters, especially Melinda May, which we'll talk about a little bit more as we go along here. The cast is sort of growing into a cast of people that I'm really invested in and enjoying and doing interesting spy things on screen, which I'm really excited about because, I love the espionage genre. So, yeah, I agree. This was by far, I think, my favorite one.
Yeah, the best thing about this episode for me is, and we'll talk about later on, all of the kind of political and social commentary going on, which is quite good in this one, as it has been pretty much all the way through, I think. But the fun thing for me was just getting to see all of the detective work.
Yes.
Especially from Coulson. That was great.
Yeah. I like that there's so many ethical questions for him as a character in this, too. Especially seeing that this guy who's this eternal optimist and things like that works in this organization, he does have some skeletons in his closet. Like he got here maybe to the point that he is now, maybe being more like, people like Maria Hill and Melinda May, as we see in here, who are a little bit more cynical about the way they view the world and things like that, which I thought was really interesting.
The sense I got was that he used to be like that.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. Like he's gotten to this point being that before. I think that's an interesting facet of his character.
I'm starting to wonder if the show isn't playing up, and I don't know if it's doing this on purpose, but I picked up on it this episode, if Coulson's death isn't being treated like a midlife crisis.
They did say something to that effect in, like, the first episode, didn't they, when they were talking about the car and things like that, where he's trying to sort of recapture his earlier days and things like that.
That was actually a second episode, and I'm thinking about it even more, with the girl that he used to date. In the second episode, she was talking about that, and here, I'm thinking about it even more where, like, he's looking back on the way he used to be and he's having to clean up old messes, and he's like, I'm not that guy anymore. I've become a different person. And it's really interesting getting a character that, he was pre-established, we've seen him before, but he never had character stuff to do. We didn't know anything about Coulson that really defined him as a character, as a full-fledged three-dimensional character before. So, for all intents and purposes, we're introducing this character in a second life, in the latter half of a middle-aged man's life, and we're having to piece together what he used to be like and how that's informing the kind of person he is now, and where he's got to kind of reconcile not just the mistakes that he used to make, but also is the way he's going now like actually working, or is it too oversimplified? Is he going to be able to just be the full-blown optimist that he's trying to be, or is there still a little bit of that in him that it's impossible to get away from because he sometimes needs it? I like that. I can't think of a time that I've seen that very often, especially on a television show where you meet this guy in such a later stage.
Yeah, I agree. And if our predictions come true about him being a life model decoy, it's going to be such an emotionally resonant revelation when we realize that this guy that's been working to change himself so incessantly into an optimistic person and do his job like this, that he's not even a real human being. That's going to be, even if he's not a life model decoy and we find out whatever S.H.I.E.L.D. did to him. Because we do confirm in this episode, S.H.I.E.L.D. is somewhat responsible for what happened.
They did something to him, yeah. And I think it's really interesting that the guest star in this picked up on that because she knew him so well. And we've been doing this a lot lately, right? Where Coulson, like twice already in 4 episodes, Coulson has met some important figure from his past who looks at him and says, "You're not the way I remember you. What happened to you?" And I like that this girl picks up on it a lot more than the first one did, because the first one was just kind of of like a throwaway lover. I thought like they had a past, but I didn't get the sense that they were intimate, but briefly. Whereas this girl, he trained and as a shield agent, and they had this different kind of very intimate sort of relationship,
Yeah,
right?
it's like the relationship Ward and Sky have, the mentor.
It's exactly that. Good call.
And I like that this is sort of a flip of the traditional "you've been changed by a terrible experience" kind of thing, because we've seen that a million times where we see someone who's an optimist at the beginning, like in war movies, for example. Someone I've seen, like Platoon. It's this film where Charlie Sheen's character he's an optimist about America's cause in the war at the beginning, and then he goes through it, and obviously through the experience it's terrible, and it sort of brings him down, and he becomes sort of this cynic, and he's broken down as a human being by the end. It's sort of the opposite of that here, where he was cynical earlier in his life, and these experiences like death and working for this shadowy organization have turned him into an optimist. I think that's an interesting juxtaposition and place to go with the character.
Being a Whedon show, I keep assuming that as this goes along, it's likely to get darker,
Yeah.
and hope that one of the things it doesn't do is harden Coulson more, no matter what he turns out to be or what S.H.I.E.L.D. did to him with his death in
Mhm.
Avengers. Because what would be really interesting would be to see this character, no matter how dark and difficult and treacherous the world gets around him, refuses to get away from that optimism. That he refuses to make the same mistakes he made earlier on in his life. And I think that he is one of those characters. I think there's a good argument here sometimes for characters that the point is that they refuse to change. I've said this with Batman a lot. That a lot of Batman stories aren't about him having a character arc. It's about the reasons that he refuses to change. Good stories give a character an opportunity for change, but what teaches us about that character, what reveals things about that character, is not necessarily how they go through a character arc and they change, but whether or not they allow themselves to, and why they made that choice. That can be just as revealing as if they actually do that. So Coulson is a character that I want to see go through this entire series and refuse to change. I think he's that kind of a character.
I agree. I think it's going to get dark in that Whedon will challenge him and that optimism so desperately that you'll break him down to the point where he'll almost change, and what will be inspiring about him is that he refuses and keeps going. Like, you could use the example of Batman. He's been given the choice to give up, or to go past that moral line of not killing that he always has, in the interest of some perceived greater good. Like, fans always say, why doesn't he kill the Joker and all that sort of thing. uh the thing that's heroic about Batman, I think, is that he doesn't kill the Joker. That's a line he won't cross ethically, and I think that's the same sort of thing that's going to happen with Coulson. I agree. That's what I want to see.
Yeah, neither of these are characters that believe in the idea of ends justifies the means. They want to do what they see to be the right choice, even if bad things happen because of it, because they don't see themselves as responsible for the bad things that might happen based on the thing they did that was the right thing to do no matter what. And so, yeah, Coulson, I really hope is ultimately that kind of character. Now he could become more sober. He could
Yeah.
he could get more down to earth, and I imagine that he will. He's being somewhat extreme about it now with the cars and with
Yes.
the way he touts things up. And I think that even what some people consider to be a silly one-liners are even kind of a part of that. He's living a fantasy right now. I think that eventually he might settle into a more sober version of that, but he's still not going to, hopefully, he's still not going to allow himself to go back to the cynic he used to be.
Yeah, and maybe it's the sort of thing where he's overcompensating at this point because in the deepest part of his psyche and his heart, I suppose, believe that 100%, and maybe that'll be reaffirmed as we go through the show, that maybe he will come to believe in people as wholeheartedly as he pretends to, or that he puts on the front of believing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and some of that is also a feeling of emptiness. It's an internal conflict
Yes.
of I'm not sure I'm the same person I was before I died. What I'd like to know is if the whole total optimistic thing came before Avengers or after whatever happened to him. And we get the sense that he's become very, very different because of whatever happened to him. And I'd like to know if there was any kind of a lead up to that before he died, or if it's all from after he died. Was he the more cynical minded person in Iron Man, in Thor? I think he was. I think that the change just happened.
I think Captain America coming back had a large effect on him in Avengers too, because he talks about people needing a little bit more of an old-fashioned point of view, especially when he
Absolutely.
talks about the stars and stripes on Captain America's costume, and the whole thing with the trading cards. I think that was something that had a large effect on him, and that's when we started seeing him crack more of the uh, Coulson of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. esque one-liners. I can't remember as many of them from the Iron Man and Thor films, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah. He also didn't get quite as much screen time, though.
That's true. That's true. And maybe that's the reason why. But I remember him being a little bit more of sort of the stereotypical spy in those movies, in more in line with the characterization as someone like Maria Hill, and that's why I didn't necessarily latch onto him in those movies as much. The Avengers was where I really came to like and feel invested in the character, to be honest.
Let's get into I agree with you. Let's go ahead and get into the episode as a whole.
Sure.
If you don't mind, I'd like to go down, and you bring up some of yours too. I'd like to go down some kind of disjointed notes that I wrote just as I watched the episode. So we'll discuss a few minor things that wouldn't come up in any of our subjects later
Oh
on
yeah.
that I just wanted to make sure got mentioned. The first thing is I really enjoyed a lot of the cool, mysterious music cues in this episode, especially in the teaser. It felt very late 80s, early 90s spy show.
Oh yeah, definitely. I was very pleased with how you would mention this, I think, a little bit. All of the detective work and actual spy espionage kind of legwork that they have to do in this. I mean, they did it in the previous episodes, but there was them actually getting on the ground, examining like corpses and seeing uh, things like that, and using spy espionage technology to locate people. There was just a lot more of the spy technology being used in interesting ways, I suppose. Not that there wasn't spy technology used in the previous episodes, but I felt like it was used in a more interesting way here, I guess. Especially the glasses that they used in here. I thought that was a very interesting sort of device. And difficult to use for the spy, where they could never look in a mirror. Like, that was very well thought out.
It was, although I want to talk about that a
Sure.
little bit. That was one of the criticisms I had of it, is that that was a great idea and it worked out really well for the most part, but there were a couple of places where it made me wonder if Ward could get away with some of the things he was doing. He takes out a Russian guard without ever looking at his hands. I have a really hard time buying that. He gets in like a fist kick fight with him, and he never looks at his own
I was
hands.
thinking that too. Yeah.
That seems hard. Also, he's driving a car. This is all minor, but kind of interesting and fun. Maybe he's driving a car um,
Sky and
with Sky
backseat.
in the back. And you're telling me that with all the reflective surfaces on a car, the handler never saw her in the back seat?
That's true. I didn't even think about that.
That's tough. And the other thing I really didn't like about that was, and I hate this because this is okay. Let me mention this real quick. I'm gonna give a directing criticism, and I loved the directing in this episode for the most part. This episode was directed by Roxanne Dawson, who played B'Elanna Torres in Star Trek Voyager, and
Uh-huh.
Roxanne Dawson has made a career for herself of directing TV episodes. She directed all kinds of stuff. She directed a lot of Enterprise, and she's done a number of different shows here and there, well after Star Trek, and it was really fun to get to see her name on this because this is just the kind of thing that it made sense to see her do. Also, interestingly, did you ever watch the show Chuck, which was another kind of
No,
spy
I have
show?
not seen it.
Okay, Chuck was executive produced by Robert Duncan McNeil, who played Tom Paris in Star Trek Voyager, who was married to the character of B'Elanna Torres, and so they both have directed spy shows now.
Oh, that's cool.
And actually, well, I'm not sure Robert Duncan McNeil directed any of that show, but he I mean, it was his show. He
Right. He was the showrunner.
He was one of the showrunners, yeah. Anyway, sorry, that's not here nor there. But I am going to criticize the directing thing because there's a place where Ward reaches for a gun while he's wearing those glasses, and they do an insert shot that's a first-person POV. That's a terrible idea. Like, why would you do a POV shot when he's not supposed to be able to look at his hands?
Was he looking at the gun with the glasses on?
Yeah. Well, all I'm saying is he might not have been looking at the gun, but why would you do a POV insert shot when the person whose POV it is would not be looking at the gun? POV shots are to make you feel like you're looking at what the character is looking at. It was also weird when Sky said, we have to make sure that the handler doesn't notice that you have man hands. And I was thinking, well, more importantly, that he's of a different ethnicity.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. I was like, the woman's African American. They'd know right away, even if he didn't have man hands.
What was that line about?
At least I assumed she was African American. I didn't know if she was, because S.H.I.E.L.D's a UN peacekeeping task force. She could have been from another country.
Yeah, I mean, Coulson just calls her black, so we don't know where she's from, but she has an American accent, so I would assume she's from America. By the way, I thought she was quite good.
I thought she was good too, yeah. Especially when she was playing at the beginning of the episode. She was very lethal looking, at least in her performance, when she was like threatening, especially that guy when he showed up with more than one person to the meeting she had with the diamonds. It was like, wow, she's intense. Performance was very good.
I'm really enjoying how Sky, every time she goes on one of these manhunts, acts like she's a kid on a field trip. That's kind of fun, especially during that conversation where maybe some people didn't find this funny. I thought it was amusing when it was like, how do we go to the bathroom and how do we have any snacks? I don't know. These are people that aren't supposed to be in the field, and that all kind of actually worked for me, especially because right after that it was like, holy crap, this thing that we're tapping into is showing our van and it's coming right at us. Like that was kind of some misdirection so that we wouldn't realize that something kind of more exciting and jarring was about to happen.
Yeah, they gave Sky and company a better. I think not better. I mean, it was justified in the previous episodes, I think, pretty well. But I think this gave them the best reason to be involved in the action that was going on in the field to a degree. You felt like Sky and Fitzsimmons in the van, like they were just there out of circumstance and coincidence, and she was escaping and needed to get rid of them, and that's why they were involved in that. And then you needed Sky in the van at that point to be helping out Ward with the technology. So it wasn't like you were sending Sky out in the field with zero, perceived experience just cause.
Just because she's the main character.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, and they did a good job of that last episode too, where she didn't really have much experience, and they talked about that a lot. But she was the best person for the job at that moment.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
Let's talk about Melinda May. I think it's really interesting how this was something you talked about a lot in the pilot about how everybody is in S.H.I.E.L.D. seems to be a little bit devious in that they will, maybe devious isn't the right word, but they'll work behind people's backs if they think it's best for the team. Mm-hmm. And so she has this. She's supposed to be monitoring the woman with the eyepiece, but ultimately she leaves that post and actually goes to her. And it turns out that was the best thing to do. Now I wonder why she wasn't reprimanded for it.
Yeah, I mean, I was sort of questioning that too, and I think maybe the reason why was because Coulson sort of covered for her, and there were no really all that negative consequences at the end of the day as to what she did. It wasn't the best decision to make, and I wrote down my best moment as her sort of emerging as a character in this episode. Yeah. I thought the thing that was great about her in here was Coulson in this episode is all about placing his faith in his team. And he's been like this throughout the whole series. But Melinda May in this episode emerges as a character who doesn't put a lot of faith in working with other people. She likes to rely on herself more than she likes to rely on other people. That classic philosophy of if you want something done right, you got to do it yourself. And she's sort of cynical in that she thinks, nobody's going to be able to do anything as competently as I'd like them to do it, because she thinks of herself. Not that she's completely arrogant, but I think to a degree she thinks she is better and almost justifiably so at what she does physically and as a spy. I mean, maybe she's not the best thinker, but
Yeah, it's not arrogant at all. It's yeah, I don't think. I think it's just a fact. She actually had to in the last few episodes. Or that's dumb. That's all we've had. Is a few episodes. But like last episode when she finally, excuse me, when she finally agreed to be in combat situations and have Coulson's back, as she says it, she's having to own up to the fact that she still has all the skills she always had. She is the best combat person on the team. She's pretty much the best person at everything except for tech stuff.
mm-hmm.
And but she also can fly an airplane, so she's not that bad at those things either. So I'm just saying that I think that the issue is she realizes that she's kind of a jack of all trades, and if she's going to be on this team, she can't hold back. She has to use those skills, or it could jeopardize the team in some way. So I felt like her going against Coulson's orders to go do the thing that, because she had more information than anybody else did at that time, and it was ultimately the thing to do. I kind of felt like that was her doing like the ultimate conclusion of the understanding she has with Coulson. I have your back, meaning trust me. Whatever I need to do, trust me to do it. Give me carte blanche, and I feel like Coulson's given her carte blanche. I think that's the reason that that he doesn't reprimand her. I guess now that I'm thinking about it, it's okay that there's no reprimand. I just kind of would have liked a conversation between them after that happened. You know what I mean? Because I'm not sure that the understanding that they have is as cut and dry as that. I feel like this was the precedent to make it that. I could have used a 20-second conversation where she says, "Coulson, I'm sorry, I went against your orders," and maybe he just looks at her and says, "I understand why you did it, and I trust you." But I think there needed to be a conversation.
Yeah, I think so too. And I don't know. I think to a degree she was overestimating her skills a little bit in this case.
Oh, you think so?
I think so. As a not necessarily as a combat field agent, but as someone that assesses and makes the right decisions in how to go about using her skills. Because we know something happened in the field that was terrible with her before that took her out of it. And I think she overestimated her skills in that case too. And she was worried about that happening again. And it happened here once again. There was no bad consequences this time. But you got to wonder if she does that again, what will happen.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Didn't it all kind of work out? Like,
It did. But if the situation wasn't handled by Coulson in coming in and, fixing a mistake, it could have went very poorly.
I guess that's a good point. Yeah. Okay. I like all the misdirection in this episode.
That was your best
I
moment?
think. What's that?
Was that your best moment? I didn't know if
Oh
we were
no,
going
we
with that.
actually hadn't even gotten to that
Oh,
stuff yet.
okay,
I just
sure.
had notes. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
But, I'm sorry. I'll do my best moment in a moment. In a
No,
moment. I do
good.
want to
Don't worry
say
about it.
that one of my favorite things about the episode was the misdirection. I did not call that the girl didn't have precognition or telepathy, and I mean, they were playing it up to a point where I figured it was probably something else, but I wasn't sure what it was.
Yeah.
And for a long time, everything she was doing could have been that. And then it's neat that just when she starts to do something that where it's she has information that she couldn't have gotten that way, immediately the episode is smart enough to let us know right then what it is she can do, and that's the van. I mean, that's when she sees the van and all of that. I think incrementally it's really interesting to piece together more and more of what exactly is going on with her, all the way up to the point where because like that was already intriguing. Oh, she's got like a camera in her eye or something, and then wait, someone's telling her to do something. Like I was very involved in all of that, and then when finally we find out that her handler is also being controlled by someone else. That was even more interesting. And then and we get that 4 minutes before the episode's over. I remember looking at the timestamp going, wait, the episode's over? Oh, that's because this isn't just a standalone thing. There's a larger organization at work here, and I'm gonna assume that you'll agree with me when I say that this is the same organization that was trying to control the superpowered guy in the first episode.
Yes, I think it's Hydra.
And I think it's the same kind of whatever the organization is. It's the same sort of thing, isn't it? It's like preying on somebody's vulnerability. Like with him, it was I have family problems, I have money problems. With this girl, it was because of a mission that she did. I got blind and I need to fix my
Yeah,
eyes.
and the same thing with Sky. I mean, she's a person that doesn't have a family. It's an organization that takes advantage of the people that don't have a place in society and gives them a perceived purpose. Uh, and that's, I think, a very interesting thing to talk about.
Does that make you wonder if the Rising Tide isn't owned by that organization?
I think they're one and the same. Yeah, I think
Okay,
Rising Tide
okay.
is the front for Hydra because of all the clues that we got in the first episode about them being connected to that name wise, all the little drops that we got. Yeah, I think that's.
I didn't make that connection till just now, but you're right because she would fit the profile.
Yes, she would. She would.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and go on to best moment, worst moment. You gave us yours. I think mine is the scene where Coulson's doing all that detective work and he's deducing details about the handler when he figures out that he's British and he has fatter fingers and he's out of touch with current cultural references. I loved all of that. That was really great. It's cool when the writing is so good that when she looks at him and says, "You're still really good at this," they've proven that to me already. So that line works really well.
Yes, yes.
That's not the sort of thing where it's telling me something where it's just telling me something. It's showing it to me, and then she says, "You're really good at this." At the same time, that in my mind, I'm going, "Wow, he's really good at this." That was sophisticated. I like that.
I thought it was great, and I loved how it is sort of related to that moment. How again the misdirection thing you were talking about, where Coulson finds that guy, and you think he's going to be this like mastermind supervillain, because it's playing on your expectations for this as a Marvel Comics show existing in a superhero universe the whole time. Because like you said, there's the telepathy thing we're expecting, and then maybe you expect this guy that's controlling her to be this evil, mechanizing guy, and then you find out he's just another pawn too in this giant game. And I love that reveal. It was
Yeah,
great.
and it was really sad because his eye explodes, which is the whole thing they've been trying to avoid for her, and and it shows us what the stakes are. I mean, that really was going to happen.
Yes, exactly. Uh,
What was your worst moment?
my worst moment, I think, was actually the water bottle gag with the peeing that you had talked about before. I didn't care for that at all.
Yeah, I didn't care for the gag. I was just kind of okay with some of the banter because it was better than it has been before, and I'm starting to like those characters together a little bit more.
Yeah.
I think I don't know. Her line was okay for me, but whatever.
Yeah, I don't know. I just didn't find that all that they just seem like they need to make some sort of obligatory joke about, female or male parts in an
Yeah,
episode, it seems like now, which is kind of strange to me. But
that's true. And yeah, and to be fair, that's a little bit of a Whedon thing. That went, yeah. I mean, that went all the way. That went right back to Doctor Horrible, with the that's not the hammer line. But anyway, well, my worst moment, and this is really minor, but it bugged me. And let me preface this with Fitzsimmons did not annoy me in this episode in the way they have before.
I agree.
I was
I like them much more in
okay with
this.
them. I enjoyed getting to see them have to do something that was legitimately really difficult
Hmm.
and having to figure out how they were going to do it. That was okay. What I did, and Fitz being queasy is an obvious thing to do, but it was okay with me.
Hmm.
What I didn't get, I'm going to make this my worst moment because I didn't understand it. Okay, so Fitz later on is all queasy when they're doing the surgery on the eyeball, and that makes perfect sense. But to set up his queasiness, they have him get queasy watching someone put in a contact lens.
Yeah, that was weird.
That's weird. What? Really? Do people get queasy watching a person? I mean, I realize it's really close up to her eye, like he can see it from her perspective. So, but like he turns away like he's seeing someone like so into their arm or
Yeah, it's
something.
almost like he has a eyeball fear or something.
Yeah, so like, yeah, it was like they were setting up that he's queasy about surgery. They were setting up that he has a weird eyeball problem
He can't
thing.
look people in the eye. Eye contact does not happen for that guy.
Oh wow, you think there's a deeper seated kind of thing? He can't. He's too shifty
That'll be
eyed.
his character arc for the season. He'll learn how to look people in the eyes.
Oh, dear lord. Okay, let's go on to if that's what they do with him, I'm gonna lose my mind. Let's go on to what's the big idea, Dan. Give me one big kind of theme or message or some sort of subtext that you notice. Go ahead.
The thing that I really noticed was sort of twofold, but the ideas sort of play into each other, I think. The first one, obviously, is the surveillance thing and how infringing that can be on civil liberties and the freedoms that a person can have in their life as an individual. We have this lady who's completely controlled because her every move is being watched. It's like a higher form of intimidation where, like, you can't do anything wrong, otherwise Big Brother will come after you. And that's something that people have been talking about as we advance into this age of technology. Especially, they make comment here about how people are giving up their own privacy with things like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. Like, all the work is being done for the NSA. They almost don't even need to be spying on us. All the information's that they might need is public already. I think
All that surveillance legally.
yeah, exactly. And I think the thing about it is, we have this lady who's being controlled, and she's able to walk around somewhat freely in society. When she doesn't have a mission, but we have her in a prison cell at the end of the episode, and it's overlaced with Sky saying it's so peaceful in here, and the lady feels more free as an individual in a prison cell not being watched than she does walking around in society while being watched all the time. And I think that's a very interesting point to make. And I think it's a true point to make. And then the other thing that I think, obviously, we had talked about before was believing in people as individuals and placing your faith in them. Coulson places his faith in his team rather than Melinda May, who doesn't, and ends up uh, screwing her over in the end. She doesn't trust anybody besides herself to do anything. And I think that's the same sort of thing, trusting individuals to have civil liberties as a figure of authority. Like, Loki talks about this in the Avengers movie, how people are made to be ruled, and freedom is life's great lie. That humans kill each other in droves because they have the freedom to do so, and if someone was controlling them and making sure that they weren't all the time, they wouldn't do bad things. And I think that's sort of the crux of what this is saying here, is maybe if we had people being controlled, maybe bad things wouldn't happen as often. But is that something that we really want to have? It's an artificial piece, if you know what I mean.
Well, and also tied to that is the loss of humanity
Exactly.
through mechanization. Uh, you've got she doesn't just feel more free at the end because she's not being. I mean, she's in a peaceful place. She feels that way because she's no longer mechanized. She's a whole person now. She got that thing out of her, and there's nobody watching her. There's nobody to control her.
Yeah.
And I think that she felt like she was becoming less of a human being while she was that way. And so part of the question too, and this is a classic science fiction idea, of course, is the more technologically advanced we get, are we creating technologies that are changing what we are at the core
Mm-hmm.
as human beings? How much does it change us? How different are we when we take something that we used to just turn on and off sometimes as a video camera to record something and then keep that, versus putting that in our head and always be recording whatever we're seeing? How does that change us as people? And I realized that here it was a different thing because it was surveillance and and this person was being controlled. But because of the fact that it references Facebook and other sorts of things that are helping government agencies do surveillance on us. I think that that's also being questioned. That as we're developing these technologies and people are using them freely, are people are people of their own free will giving up freedoms that they have already and not even realizing it?
Yeah.
Not are people? Are we changing what we used to? Is it changing our prioritization? Is it changing what we care most about? 20 years ago, one of the biggest things that people would talk about would be how they were afraid of Big Brother, how they were afraid of the government making them lose their privacy, and you don't hear that as often now. And I think that's interesting. I think part of that is because people don't think about privacy the way they used to. I think some people get the notion that because everybody's recording things all the time, because they like putting their pictures on Facebook and that sort of thing, that privacy is not even as important as it used to be. And it doesn't occur to them that perhaps that's something they might want. And
Yeah.
I think here what we have are two people with Sky and with Aquila who don't know how much they appreciate that freedom of privacy until they've lost it.
Right, exactly. That's why, those two are juxtaposed at the end when Sky's talking about it being peaceful and that sort of isolated space. They'd rather be in an isolated space alone, not talking to anyone. Granted, Coulson comes into Sky's van in that scene, but she was planning on staying there alone. They feel more free, locked up as physically than they do being watched and being able to walk freely around in society. So yeah, that's definitely something that's going on in there.
Let's go ahead and move on to the guest star. The big one, of course, is Pascal Armand, who played Aquila, and she is not a major character actor. She has not a whole lot of references on IMDb. She's been around since 2000, but she's mostly had just small one-time roles in stuff like Law and Order: Criminal Intent, and I've never seen her before myself, but I thought she was quite good. I think she should get cast in more stuff because I thought she was pretty solid.
I thought she was good too. Yeah, and I don't think that Aquila was a character from Marvel Comics or anything. From when I was researching it, she didn't look like she was.
No, they haven't been doing a lot of that yet. I mean, we got that with the Doctor from last episode, but so far he's the only person that they've really a major character for an episode that they've pulled out of comics and thrown right in the show.
And some people have said that's been a detriment to it, that they want more sort of comic book characters and stuff in here. But me personally, it doesn't bother me too much. If it was just like the Marvel Comics sideshow, the television show, I don't know that I necessarily enjoy it as much.
I get both sides of it. There is a part of me sometimes that has to remind myself I'm watching a show set in the Marvel universe.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a little bit. I'm not saying that it feels wholly separate, like it's a totally different universe. It's just sometimes I have to kind of remind myself that I'm like, oh yeah, there are superheroes in this world. But I really think that as the thing goes on, that's going to be a moot point. I really think as it goes along, it's likely to get bigger and feature more of those kinds of things.
Mhm.
Um, I think that what you do with a show like this is you carve out your own identity first.
Yes.
And then you allow it to seep into the rest of the world. What was your favorite line, Dan? Did you have one?
My favorite line was the "It's more peaceful in here" line that I had mentioned before. I thought it just spoke thematically very well to what the show was doing, and I liked the way the directing was done, how they juxtaposed the way the two characters learned about, you had talked about their privacy and all of that sort of thing. I thought it was just a very fitting way to end the episode, and I enjoyed it quite a bit.
This wasn't a great one for one-liners, so I didn't have any just straight-up line that by itself was really good. There was one I liked because it was part of that misdirection I was talking about earlier. I like it when when that I want to say it was maybe the Russian guy in the hotel room, I forget, but when somebody looks at Aquila and says, she says something, and he says, "How do you know that?" And she says, "Well, it'll come to me." Because at that point you don't know that she's being fed information yet,
Yeah.
and you've got Sky talking about how she's probably got ESP or something, and it turns out not to be that. So at that point, we're thinking, oh, she'll read someone's mind, but it's actually I'm going to be sent this information, and then I'm going to be sent on a mission. So I liked how the dialogue in this episode was used for that kind of misdirection. All right, so comic book references. I didn't really pick up on anything at all myself, so I messed around a little bit on the internet to see if anybody else had caught anything, and there was an article on Wired that mentioned a couple of things that I think are both big stretches, but I wanted to bring them up anyway because I didn't have anything on my own. Unless you had anything, Dan.
I mean, the only thing I can sort of think of was a speculative one. I think a lot of people were speculating in the shots that had been put out on the internet when they were filming the episode of the guys with the red masks on that people had thought they were agents of Tide, agents who were connected to Hydra and by association the Red Skull, and how they were, sort of zealots of that sort of ideology and were dressing up like him. And I was a little bit surprised that they weren't related to him at all, because at the beginning of the episode, they're sort of ominous and all walking around with these briefcases and identical suitcases. I'm like, these guys are going to be terrorists or something, but they weren't at all.
Yeah, it was kind of fun that they, subverted our expectations with that, because it turned out that they were just trying to move diamonds.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
I was really surprised by that. Yeah, I thought they were going to be our bad guys,
Me
and it
too.
turned
Me
out
too.
it turned out that they were just doing their jobs. That was interesting.
It was, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the couple of things this Wired article mentioned. This one is such a stretch. That it mentions the line about Sky saying "bang" whenever she shoots guns, and how that's like automatopoeia in comic books. I thought, okay,
That's
well,
from
it's sort
DC
of like
Comics, not Marvel. That's weird.
no, it's sort of like Deadpool though, because Deadpool when he fires guns, a lot of time will say "bang bang."
Oh, I thought you were talking about Onomatopoeia, the character from DC. That.
No, I just mean like sound effect
Oh,
words.
sure, yeah.
Not the character. But yeah,
Sorry.
that it's like no, you're cool. But that it's sort of like the Deadpool thing. I think that's a stretch. I'm not sure they were thinking that when they
Yeah,
wrote
I
that.
mean, you could attribute that to Rocket Raccoon in the recent Guardian series too, right?
Yeah, that's right. The other one is well, and actually, I don't think the article even specifically mentioned Deadpool. They just mentioned sound effects words, which I thought was even more of a stretch than
Mhm.
just it being sort of like Deadpool. But the other one is yeah, okay. So the guy that wrote, whoever wrote this article, thinks that there's that they're setting it up so that there's no telepathy in this universe because the X-Men are off limits, and I don't think that's
I
it.
that's it.
I don't think that just because this turned out not to be telepathy, that means that there is no ESP in this Marvel universe. Could you imagine if if they've decided for the whole of the Marvel Cinematic Universe we'll never have a character with ESP? How are they going to do Scarlet Witch? Like, I don't.
Well, she doesn't have telepathy, but
Does she not? I thought sometimes she did.
no, her powers are they're all about altering reality with her hex powers.
Oh, okay. See, first of all, it's not a character that I know that much
Sure.
about. Like, I've been reading her lately in comics, but before that, I hadn't much. So I thought that was part of her power set. But it's not like now I can't think of any great examples off the top of my head. But surely the only characters in Marvel that had telepathy aren't just mutants.
I don't think so. Um, I mean, none are coming to mind.
See, now are coming to my mind.
Yeah.
They could. I mean, the article could be onto something, I guess, but I really doubt that they're saying there is no ESP whatsoever in this universe. Or don't you?
I don't think that. No, I don't think that's true. I mean,
I would want to keep my mind open about
yeah, I
that.
mean that's just such a arbitrary thing to keep off limits. I think just because it's not like the X Men invented telepathy, and because you can't use any of the X Men characters that no character could ever have it. I mean, there were characters invented before the X Men that had telepathy in fiction.
Like it's not like there's a point where Ward or Coulson or someone says, "See, I told you so." There is no such thing as telepathy. Like she turns out to just be wrong about
Right.
it. And I think that they brought up the whole, we don't think that's real thing just because they still haven't opened their minds to all possibilities yet. Because yeah, they have aliens and they have wormholes and things now,
Right.
but like they haven't experienced all of these things. I would be so surprised if there wasn't a point where we get somebody that has that.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised either in the Avengers movies or maybe in this show. Who knows?
Now, I also wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't technological in nature, where it wasn't actually a superpower, but it was technology that created it, because that's such a big thing in this show. Let's go ahead and go on to predictions. Do you have any?
This just plays into the prediction we had before about Sky having some sort of uh, attractiveness on the part of male powers. Uh, Ward like almost reflexively glances at her when they're in the car, and he knows that he's not supposed to be looking at anyone, and she has to tell him, "Don't look at me," when he touches
He
her.
doesn't make that mistake anywhere else. He, like I said, he beats up a guy without looking at his own hands.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're right. There's got to be something to that. And if there is, they're seeding it so subtly.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I hope they do something with it. I hope we're not just overanalyzing the crap out of it, you know?
I mean, neither of us would have, I don't think, ever come up with that if it hadn't been for one of our viewers who mentioned
I
it.
don't think so.
Okay, I didn't really have anything either. I mean, there's some more stuff that points to ideas we've had about Coulson, but that's about it. So let's go ahead and move on now to our trivia questions for this week. And last time, Dan, what was your trivia question, and what was the answer to it?
My trivia question was, prior to joining S.H.I.E.L.D., which agent was a circus strongman? And a lot of people got the answer in the comments. The answer was Dum Dum Dugan.
Yeah, when people started writing that in there for a minute, I was like, wait, where was he in this episode?
That would have been
And then
awesome.
I was like, oh, that's the answer to Dan. So, and I saw so many people writing that in that I was like, did we miss something major?
I would have loved if they could somehow work a way to bring him in, because he was in the Captain America movie, but I don't think they're going to go for the whole bringing 40s characters into the modern day thing, other than Cap.
Probably not. Not until season 8.
Yeah.
My trivia question from last time was, in what state did Ward grow up in? And the answer was Massachusetts.
Yay, Massachusetts.
They told us last time. Dan, what is your trivia question for today?
My trivia question is, who is the only supervillain in the Marvel Universe to be appointed director of S.H.I.E.L.D.?
Ooh,
Yes.
that's easy to me, but come on.
We'll see. We'll see if people remember.
Oh, okay, okay. My question, as always, is from the episode, and it is: what color is the dandrotoxin in the Night Night gun? They show us a vial of it.
I think I remember.
Yep. What color is it? That's the question. Well, everybody, thanks as always for listening to S.H.I.E.L.D. discussions, and we're really excited to do this again next week. Dan, I've been having a lot of fun doing this with you, man.
Yeah, it's been great, and the show is getting better.
It is getting better, yeah. I saw a lot of blogs that said the show has finally found its footing. I think it's getting closer and closer to finding its footing. But one thing I didn't mention that I really, really love, that I'm not going to extrapolate on this because we're ready to end now, but we didn't talk at all about the kind of budding relationship, not romantic or anything, but the kind of budding relationship between S.H.I.E.L.D. and Coulson that started here that I really, really liked. I mean, like, there's a bond forming between these two that was great, and I think now that that's beginning, I'm gonna start, appreciating the show a lot more just for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting that Whedon, with this Coulson character, all of the people that are close to him they sort of hold him at arm's length at the beginning, like especially with like Tony Stark. He says in the Avengers movie his first name is Agent, and by the time they're really acquainted and friends, they call him Phil. And you totally got that going on with Skye here too. She's calling him Phil all over the place. He's like, "Don't call me that."
That's right. Well, everybody, thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you again next week. I'm Captain Logan.
I'm Dan.